Chapter 1. New Year, New Resolutions. David Montgomery woke to the soft hum of the heating system and the faint aroma of coffee drifting from the kitchen. For a moment, he lay still, staring at the pale winter light filtering through the blinds. January 1st. A new year. A clean slate. He stretched, feeling the familiar ache in his shoulders, a reminder of 60-hour workweeks. But it was a good ache, the kind that came from building something worthwhile. From the kitchen came Maggie's voice, bright and melodic, humming along to a song he didn't recognize. He smiled. 2 years married, and mornings like this still felt like a gift. He swung his legs over the side of the bed, slipped on his robe and padded down the hall. Maggie was at the stove, hair pulled into a messy bun, wearing his old college sweatshirt like it was couture. She turned when she heard him, her face lighting up. "Happy New Year, sleepyhead," she said, holding up a spatula like a trophy. "You're just in time for my world-famous pancakes." David grinned. "World-famous, huh? Did they get syndicated while I was asleep?" "Don't mock the magic," she said, flipping a pancake with exaggerated flair. "This is the breakfast of champions. Or at least, the breakfast of people who stayed up until 2 watching old rom-coms." He chuckled, moving to pour himself coffee. "You picked the rom-coms. I wanted to watch the fireworks." "You wanted to watch the fireworks on TV," she corrected, sliding a pancake onto his plate. "That's not the same as actual fireworks." "Fireworks are fireworks," he said, taking a seat. "Besides, I was saving my energy for today. Big plans." "Oh," Maggie raised an eyebrow, settling across from him with her own plate. "Do tell." David sipped his coffee, savoring the warmth. "Resolutions. I've decided this is the year I finally learn to play guitar." She laughed, a bright, ringing sound that filled the kitchen. "You don't even own a guitar." "Minor detail," he said deadpan. "I'll buy one. Then I'll learn. And then," he pointed his fork at her dramatically, "I'll serenade you under the stars." "Sounds romantic," she said, smirking. "Until the neighbors call the cops for noise pollution." David grinned. "You wound me." They ate in companionable silence for a moment, the kind that spoke of comfort and familiarity. Outside, snowflakes drifted lazily past the window, settling on the quiet street. David thought about how far they'd come. 4 years of dating, 2 years of marriage, and felt a swell of pride. They weren't flashy. They didn't need TikTok-worthy moments or Instagram-perfect vacations. They had each other, and that was enough. "So," Maggie said, breaking his reverie, "what else is on your resolution list, besides torturing me with guitar practice?" David hesitated, then shrugged. "Promotion. I'm up for it this quarter. If I land it, things will get easier. More stability." Her smile softened. "You've been working so hard, David. 60 hours a week isn't nothing." "I know," he said, reaching for her hand. "But it's worth it. For us." She squeezed his fingers, her eyes warm. "I appreciate that. Really. But don't forget to live a little, okay? Work-life balance isn't just a buzzword." He chuckled. "Says the woman who joined 3 neighborhood book clubs." "2," she corrected, mock indignant. "And they're fun. You should come sometime." "Book clubs?" He raised an eyebrow. "Pretty sure I'd be the only guy there." "True," she said, grinning. "But you'd learn a lot about character development." "I'll stick to spreadsheets," he said, finishing his coffee. "But I'm glad you've made friends. It's good for you." Her expression flickered just for a second, but David caught it. Something thoughtful, almost hesitant. Then it was gone, replaced by her usual brightness. "They're great," she said lightly. "We're actually planning a little wine afternoon next weekend. Just us girls." "Sounds lively," David said, amused. "Promise me you won't start a cult." She laughed. "No cults. Just wine and gossip." David smiled, but a tiny voice in the back of his mind whispered caution. He ignored it. Maggie was smart, grounded. She wouldn't get swept up in nonsense. He stood, carrying his plate to the sink. "All right, Mrs. Montgomery. What's your big resolution?" Maggie tilted her head, considering. I think I want to focus on being more present. Less scrolling, more living." "I like that," he said, leaning down to kiss her forehead. "Very zen." She smiled up at him, and for a moment, everything felt perfect. Snow outside, warmth inside, 2 people building a life together. David thought, not for the first time, that he was the luckiest man alive. Chapter 2. The perfect partnership. David Montgomery believed in systems. At work, systems kept chaos at bay. At home, they kept life smooth. He wasn't rigid, he liked spontaneity. But he also liked knowing the bills were paid, the fridge was stocked, and the future wasn't a question mark. That morning, as he sat in his office reviewing quarterly projections, he felt a surge of satisfaction. 2 years married, and everything was on track. Promotion looming, finances stable, Maggie happy. Perfect partnership. His phone buzzed. A text from Maggie. "Maggie, coffee date with the girls. Don't wait up for lunch. Love you." David smiled, thumbs tapping back. "Enjoy. Don't let them talk you into buying a llama or something." Her reply came with a laughing emoji and a heart. He chuckled, slipping the phone back into his pocket. Maggie had been spending more time with her neighborhood friends lately. Wine nights, book clubs, yoga classes. He didn't mind. She deserved fun. And honestly, he liked that she had her own circle. Independence was attractive. Still, a tiny thought nagged at him. 3 of her closest friends were single. Not that it mattered. Maggie wasn't easily swayed. She had her own mind. He shook off the thought and focused on his spreadsheet, numbers marching neatly across the screen like obedient soldiers. Across town, Maggie slid into a cafe booth, cheeks flushed from the brisk winter air. Her friends were already there. Sophie, the loud one with opinions on everything. Jenna, sweet but perpetually unlucky in love. And Claire, who treated dating like an Olympic sport. Maggie, Sophie waved dramatically, bracelets jingling. Finally, we were about to send a search party. Traffic, Maggie said, unwinding her scarf. And someone decided to park like a toddler. Claire smirked. Probably a man. Probably, Maggie said, laughing as she settled in. The waitress appeared, and orders flew lattes, muffins, something gluten-free for Jenna. When the waitress left, Sophie leaned forward, eyes sparkling. So, Sophie said, how's married life treating you? Maggie smiled. Good. Really good. Good. Sophie repeated, mock horrified. Not amazing. Not earth-shattering. Maggie, you've been married 2 years. You need to keep the spark alive. The spark is fine, Maggie said, amused. We talk. We laugh. We don't throw plates at each other. I call that a win. Claire snorted. Talking is overrated. You need drama, passion, mystery. Drama is for reality TV, Maggie said, sipping her latte. I prefer peace. Sophie waved a manicured hand. Peace is boring. You need strategies, tips, ways to make him worship the ground you walk on. Maggie laughed. He already does. Then double down, Sophie said, eyes gleaming. We've been working on something. A list. A list. Maggie raised an eyebrow. What kind of list? The ultimate relationship checklist, Sophie said, lowering her voice like she was revealing state secrets. Guaranteed to make any man obsessed. Maggie blinked. You're serious? Dead serious, Sophie said. We've been compiling advice from podcasts, blogs, TikTok. Oh, well, if TikTok says so, Maggie said dryly. Jenna giggled. It's fun, Maggie. Just ideas. Like, compliment him more. Make him jealous sometimes. Jealous? Maggie frowned. Why would I want to do that? Because it works, Claire said, smirking. Men are like cats. They only appreciate you when they think someone else might steal you. Maggie stared at them, torn between amusement and disbelief. You do realize David and I aren't in high school, right? Sophie waved her off. Just hear us out. We'll bring the list next time. Maggie smiled politely, but inside, something twisted. She loved her friends, but this felt off. Still, she didn't argue. No point starting a debate over coffee. She'd listen, nod, and ignore the nonsense later. That evening, David came home to find Maggie curled on the couch, scrolling her phone. He kissed her cheek, dropped his briefcase, and loosened his tie. How was the coffee summit? He asked, heading to the kitchen. Good, she said lightly. Lots of chatter. Sophie's planning a wine afternoon next weekend. Sounds dangerous, he called back, grabbing a beer. Should I alert the fire department? She laughed, but her smile didn't quite reach her eyes. David noticed but didn't press. Instead, he settled beside her, arm draped over the back of the couch. Movie? He asked. Sure, she said, leaning into him. Something funny. As the opening credits rolled, David thought again about systems, how they worked until someone decided to rewrite the rules. He didn't know why that thought came now, but it lingered like a shadow at the edge of the screen. Chapter 3. The list. Saturday afternoon sunlight streamed through the living room windows, casting warm stripes across the hardwood floor. Maggie had arranged the wine glasses with care, stemware polished, a charcuterie board artfully assembled. She wanted everything to look effortless, though the truth was she'd spent an hour fussing over details. Sophie, Jenna, and Claire were due any minute, and Maggie felt a flutter of anticipation mixed with something she couldn't quite name. David was in the den, finishing up a few work emails. He'd promised to keep out of the way, and Maggie appreciated that. This was her space, her time. Still, she hoped he'd pop in for a glass later. It would be nice for him to see her friends in a relaxed setting. The doorbell rang. Maggie opened it to a chorus of greetings and the scent of expensive perfume. Sophie swept in first, wearing a coat that looked like it belonged on a runway. Jenna followed, clutching a bottle of rose like a peace offering, and Claire brought up the rear, phone in hand, already scrolling. Girl, this place is adorable, Sophie declared, tossing her coat onto a chair without waiting for permission. So cozy, like a Pinterest board come to life. Thanks, Maggie said, smiling as she ushered them in. Wine's ready. They settled around the coffee table, laughter bubbling as corks popped and glasses clinked. Conversation flowed, holiday stories, dating disasters, Jenna's latest attempt at sourdough. Maggie relaxed, sipping her wine, until Sophie leaned forward with a conspiratorial grin. "All right, ladies," Sophie said, producing a folded sheet of paper from her purse like it was the Dead Sea Scrolls. "The moment you've all been waiting for." Maggie blinked. "What's that?" "The list," Sophie said, eyes gleaming. "The ultimate relationship checklist. Guaranteed to keep your man obsessed." Claire smirked. "We've been working on this for weeks." Jenna nodded eagerly. "It's genius." Maggie laughed, a little uneasy. "You're serious?" "Dead serious," Sophie said, smoothing the paper. "Step 1, always keep him guessing. Mystery is sexy. Step 2, Claire chimed in, make him jealous. Nothing crazy, just a little reminder that you're in demand. Step 3, Jenna added, never let him think he's winning. Men love the chase. Maggie stared at them, incredulous. "You do realize I'm married, right? This isn't a game." "It's not a game," Sophie said, sipping her wine. "It's strategy." Before Maggie could respond, a voice cut through the room, calm, steady, and devastating. "You've broken your wedding vows." The words hung in the air like a thunderclap. Maggie turned, heart lurching. David stood in the doorway, expression unreadable. He wasn't shouting. He wasn't angry. That made it worse. "What?" Maggie whispered. David's gaze was steady, his tone measured. "You vowed to forsake all others. That doesn't just mean other men. It means anyone who comes between us. And right now, you were about to let your single friends lecture me on how to be a good husband." His eyes flicked to Sophie, Jenna, and Claire, who suddenly looked very small, then back to Maggie. "That's like asking a dog to explain algebra. They don't get it." "David," Maggie began, but he raised a hand, silencing her. "You need to figure out where your loyalty is," he said quietly. "Because I'm not going to be in a marriage that's filtered through your friends. I'll be staying at my brother's for a week. Don't contact me. Don't waste my time with excuses. You need to figure out why you were willing to betray me. I hope you have answers when I come back." He turned and walked down the hall, calm as a man heading to a meeting. No slammed doors, no raised voice. Just cold, deliberate finality. Maggie sat frozen, wine glass trembling in her hand. Her friends shifted uncomfortably, murmuring platitudes. "He's just emotional," Sophie said weakly. "He'll come around." "Yeah," Jenna added. "Don't panic." But Maggie wasn't listening. For the first time since meeting them, she saw her friends clearly. Their smug advice, their subtle digs, their hunger for drama. They weren't trying to strengthen her marriage. They were trying to sabotage it. Misery loves company. She stood slowly, setting her glass down with care. Then she walked to the door and opened it. "It's time for you to leave," she said, voice steady. They hesitated, stammering apologies, but Maggie didn't hear them. She was replaying David's words, his calm accusation, his exit. For the first time in her adult life, Maggie knew fear. Not the fleeting kind, but the bone-deep terror of losing something irreplaceable. When the door clicked shut behind them, the silence was deafening. Maggie grabbed her keys, heart pounding. There was only one place she could go, the place where honesty still mattered. Her parents' house. Chapter 4. Maggie's awakening. The silence after the door clicked shut was suffocating. Maggie stood in the middle of the living room, staring at the empty space where David had been. His words echoed in her head, sharp and unyielding. "You've broken your vows." Not shouted, not snarled, spoken with calm certainty, which somehow hurt more than anger ever could. She sank onto the couch, her pulse thudding in her ears. The wine glass sat abandoned on the coffee table, a crimson smear on the rim like a crime scene. Her friends' voices still lingered faintly, their hollow reassurances. "He's just emotional. He'll come around." But Maggie knew better. David wasn't emotional. He was deliberate. When he said he needed space, he meant it. And for the first time, Maggie asked herself a question she'd never considered. Why did I let them have so much influence? She replayed the afternoon in brutal clarity. The smug tilt of Sophie's chin, the sly grin on Claire's face, Jenna's eager nodding. They weren't trying to help. They were trying to pull her into their orbit of chaos, where relationships were games and drama was currency. Misery loves company, and Maggie had been naive enough to think she was immune. Her stomach twisted. She wasn't immune. She'd let their nonsense seep into her marriage, even if only for an hour. And David had seen it. He'd seen her hesitate, seen her entertain the idea that their advice mattered. That betrayal, small but real, was enough to shake the foundation they'd built. Maggie stood abruptly, grabbing her keys. She couldn't sit here drowning in guilt. She needed clarity, guidance, someone who understood commitment, not TikTok trends. There was only one place to go. The drive to her parents' house was a blur of winter-gray streets and brittle sunlight. Maggie gripped the steering wheel like it was a lifeline, her thoughts spiraling. What if David didn't come back? What if this was the beginning of the end? 2 years of marriage, 4 years of love, gone because she'd let 3 single women dictate what keeping the spark alive meant? She blinked hard, fighting tears. No, she wouldn't let that happen. She loved David, respected him, wanted the life they dreamed of, the house, the future, the quiet mornings with pancakes and coffee. She wouldn't trade that for cheap drama and hollow validation. Her parents' house came into view, a familiar two-story with peeling shutters and a porch swing that had weathered decades of storms. Maggie pulled into the driveway, cut the engine, and sat for a moment, breathing. The air smelled faintly of wood smoke, and for the first time all day, she felt a flicker of comfort. She stepped out, crunching across the frosted lawn, and rang the bell. The door opened almost immediately, revealing her mother, apron on, flour dusting her hands, eyes widening in surprise. "Maggie? Honey, what's wrong?" The question cracked something inside her. Maggie's voice wavered. "Mom, I think I messed up." Her mother ushered her in without another word, calling for her father as she guided Maggie to the kitchen. The warmth hit her like a bomb. The scent of cinnamon rolls, the hum of the old heater, the cluttered counters that had always felt like home. Her father appeared, wiping his hands on a dish towel, brows knitting. "Talk to us," he said gently. "Start from the beginning." And so Maggie did. She told them everything. The wine afternoon, the list, David's words, his calm exit. Her parents listened without judgment, their faces grave but kind. When she finished, her mother reached across the table, squeezing her hand. "Maggie," she said softly, "marriage isn't a group project. It's two people, not five." Her father nodded. "Your friends don't live your life. You do. And if they're steering you away from your vows, they're not friends, they're distractions." Maggie swallowed hard. "I know. I see that now." "Then fix it," her mother said simply. "Own your mistake. Show him you're committed." Her father leaned back, eyes steady. "You married a good man. Don't let noise drown out what matters." Maggie felt tears spill over, hot and relentless. But beneath the ache, something solid formed, a resolve, sharp and clear. She would fight for her marriage. She would cut the noise, silence the voices that didn't belong, and remind David why they'd chosen each other. She wiped her cheeks, straightened her shoulders, and spoke with quiet conviction. "I'm going to make this right." Chapter 5. Advice and Reflection. Maggie sat at her parents' kitchen table, fingers curled around a mug of chamomile tea like it was an anchor. The cinnamon rolls her mother had baked sat untouched on a plate between them, their sugary scent mingling with the faint aroma of coffee. Normally, Maggie would have devoured two by now, but today her appetite was gone, replaced by a gnawing ache in her chest. Her mother, practical as ever, leaned against the counter, arms folded. "You know what I think?" she said, her tone calm but firm. "I think you've been listening to the wrong people." Maggie managed a weak smile. "You don't say." Her father chuckled from his seat across the table, his weathered hands wrapped around his coffee mug. "Marriage isn't a democracy, kiddo. It's a partnership. 2 votes, equal weight. Everyone else, they don't get a ballot." Maggie let out a shaky laugh. "I know. I didn't realize how much I was letting them in." Her mother softened, moving to sit beside her. "You're not the first person to get caught up in the noise, but you're smart enough to see it now. That's what matters." Maggie nodded, blinking back tears. "David's so steady. He's always been the calm one. And her voice cracked. "I made him doubt me." Her father reached across the table, his grip warm and solid. "Then show him he's wrong to doubt. Words are fine, but actions speak louder." Maggie swallowed hard. "Actions, right?" Her mother squeezed her shoulder. "Start by cutting the strings. Those friends, they're not helping you. They're pulling you off course." "I know," Maggie said quietly. "I'm done with them." "Good," her mother said. "Then remind David why he chose you. Remind him you're still the woman he married." Maggie sat back, letting their words settle like stones in a river. Solid, grounding. She thought about David's face when he spoke, the calm finality in his voice. He wasn't bluffing. He wasn't playing games. He'd drawn a line, and if she didn't act, that line would become a wall. She pulled out her phone, opened a blank note, and began typing. Plan. Not a manipulative scheme like Sophie's ridiculous list, but a real plan. Honest, heartfelt, and bold enough to prove she meant every word. Step 1. End the friendships. No drama, no explanations. Just a clean break. Step 2. Apologize. No excuses, no deflection. Own the mistake. Step 3. Show him she understood what partnership meant. Not just in words, but in choices. Her fingers hovered over the screen as an idea sparked. Something big, something that would speak louder than any apology. She didn't know all the details yet, but she knew this. She would fight for her marriage with everything she had. Maggie locked her phone and stood, resolve hardening like steel. "I'm going to fix this," she said, voice steady. Her father smiled, pride flickering in his eyes. "That's our girl." Her mother hugged her tight, whispering against her hair. "Go remind him why he fell in love with you." Maggie closed her eyes, drawing strength from their embrace. When she opened them, the fear was still there, but now it had company. Determination, fierce and unyielding. She was done being passive, done letting outside voices dictate her life. This was her marriage, her future, and she would fight for it. Starting now. Chapter 6. David at his brother's. David Montgomery wasn't a man who stormed out. He didn't slam doors or throw ultimatums like grenades. But as he pulled into his brother's driveway that Saturday afternoon, he felt the weight of what he'd done settle on his shoulders like a lead blanket. He hadn't shouted. He hadn't cursed. He'd simply walked away. Calm, deliberate, final. And somehow that felt heavier than rage. The front door swung open before he could knock. Ryan Montgomery, 2 years younger, perpetually single and smug about it, grinned like a cat who just found cream. Well, well, Ryan said, leaning against the doorframe. Look who decided to grace my humble bachelor pad. Trouble in paradise. David sighed, hauling his overnight bag inside. Not trouble. Just space. Ryan raised an eyebrow. Space? That's code for, I'm mad but pretending to be zen. David dropped the bag by the couch and sank into a chair. I'm not mad. Aha. Ryan flopped onto the opposite chair, cracking open a soda. You show up unannounced, looking like someone stole your puppy, and you're not mad. Sure. David rubbed his temples. I'm disappointed. Ryan whistled low. Ouch. That's worse. What happened? Maggie, forget your anniversary? Burn your favorite shirt. David shot him a look. She let her friends turn our marriage into a group project. Ryan blinked. Come again. They were sitting in our living room, David said, voice tight, with a list of ways to keep me obsessed. Compliment strategies, jealousy tactics, like we're in high school. Ryan snorted. Wow, that's creative. It's insulting, David said flatly. We've built our marriage on trust, respect, partnership. And she was about to let 3 single women lecture me on how to be a good husband. Ryan leaned back, grinning. So you gave them the Montgomery monologue? David's lips twitched despite himself. I told her she'd broken her vows. Ryan choked on his soda. You what? I meant it, David said, meeting his brother's wide-eyed stare. Forsaking all others isn't just about men. It's about anyone who comes between us. And if she's filtering our marriage through her friends, that's a problem. Ryan whistled again, slower this time. Damn, Dave, that's intense. David shrugged. I'm not playing games. I told her I'd be here for a week. No contact. She needs to figure out where her loyalty is. Ryan studied him for a long moment, then grinned. You know, for a guy who claims he's not mad, you're laying down some serious law. David sighed, leaning back. I love her, Ryan, more than anything. But I won't share my marriage with an audience. Ryan nodded, surprisingly serious now. Fair. But, you think she gets that? David stared at the ceiling, the question gnawing at him. Did she? Maggie was smart, grounded, usually. But those friends, they were noise, static, pulling her off frequency. He hoped she saw that. He hoped she understood what was at stake. Ryan broke the silence with a grin. So what's the plan? You gonna brood here all week? Or do we make this a brother bonding extravaganza? David smirked. Define extravaganza. Pizza, beer, bad movies, Ryan said, counting on his fingers. Maybe I teach you how to lose at video games. David chuckled, tension easing a fraction. Fine. But no rom-coms. Ryan grinned wickedly. Oh, we're watching rom-coms. You need research. David groaned. But for the first time since leaving home, he felt a flicker of relief. He wasn't happy, not by a long shot, but at least he wasn't alone. And maybe, just maybe, Maggie was somewhere realizing what he already knew. Marriage wasn't about lists or games. It was about loyalty. And he prayed she still believed that too. Chapter 7. The grand gesture or attempt. Maggie stared at her reflection in the bathroom mirror, clutching a Tupperware container like it was a weapon. Inside, David's favorite lunch, grilled chicken, roasted vegetables, and the homemade garlic aioli he loved. It wasn't flowers or a handwritten poem, but it was something. A gesture. A start. She'd spent the morning rehearsing what she'd say. I'm sorry. I was wrong. I let people interfere and it won't happen again. Simple, honest, no excuses. She'd even practiced her tone. Calm, sincere, not desperate. Unfortunately, her reflection looked more like a woman about to plead for parole. Okay, she whispered, squaring her shoulders. You've got this. She didn't feel like she had this, but she grabbed her keys anyway and headed out. David's office building loomed like a fortress of glass and steel, intimidating in its sleek perfection. Maggie parked, checked her lipstick, and marched inside, clutching the lunch like a peace treaty. The receptionist greeted her with a polite smile. Hi, Maggie said, voice a little too bright. I'm here to see David Montgomery. The receptionist typed something, then looked up. He's in a meeting. Should I let him know you're waiting? Maggie hesitated. Waiting sounded clingy. No, that's okay. I'll just drop this off. The receptionist nodded, and Maggie scribbled a quick note on the lid. For the hardest working man I know. Love, M. Felt inadequate, but she didn't have time for Shakespeare. She left the container with the receptionist and walked back to her car, heart pounding. This wasn't how she'd pictured it. She'd imagined David smiling, maybe teasing her about the garlic smell, maybe softening enough to talk. Instead, she was driving away, feeling like she just mailed an apology instead of delivering it. David returned to his desk an hour later, loosening his tie after a grueling meeting. The sight of the Tupperware stopped him cold. He lifted the lid, read the note, and stared at the neat rows of roasted vegetables like they held answers. Ryan's voice echoed in his head from last night. You think she gets it? David didn't know. But the lunch, simple, thoughtful, was a start. He ate in silence, the flavors familiar and comforting, even as his mind churned. He wasn't ready to call her. Not yet. But he wasn't angry anymore, just cautious. Meanwhile, Maggie sat in her car outside a coffee shop, nursing a latte and replaying the scene in her head. It hadn't gone the way she wanted, but she refused to give up. If David needed space, she'd give it. But she'd also make sure he knew she was fighting for them. She opened her phone, scrolled past Sophie's latest text, wine night next week, and hit delete without replying. Then she blocked the number. One down, two to go. Her fingers trembled, but her resolve didn't. This wasn't about pride. It was about loyalty. And Maggie Montgomery was done letting anyone else write her story. Chapter 8. The intervention. Maggie didn't knock. She walked straight into Sophie's apartment like a woman on a mission, because she was. Her pulse thudded in her ears, but her resolve was iron. Today wasn't about wine or gossip. Today was about cutting the strings. Sophie looked up from the couch, startled. Maggie. Hey, you're early. Not here for wine, Maggie said, voice steady. We need to talk. Claire and Jenna exchanged glances, their smiles faltering. Sophie set down her glass, eyebrows arching. Okay. What's going on? Maggie took a breath, the words sharp and clear. What's going on is that I almost let you ruin my marriage. The silence was instant, heavy. Jenna blinked. Maggie, we were just helping. Maggie's laugh was brittle. You call that helping? Sitting in my living room with a list of tricks like we're in some reality show? You don't know what marriage is. You don't know what commitment looks like. And I was stupid enough to listen. Sophie bristled. Whoa, we were trying to make things fun. Fun. Maggie cut her off. My marriage isn't a game. It's not about jealousy or mystery or whatever TikTok garbage you're peddling. It's about trust, respect, partnership. And you don't get that because you've never had it. Claire crossed her arms, defensive. You're overreacting. No, Maggie said, voice low but fierce. I'm done reacting. I'm done letting your drama bleed into my life. I love my husband. I respect him. And I will not let anyone, especially people who thrive on chaos, come between us. Jenna's eyes softened. Maggie, we didn't mean. I know, Maggie said, and for the first time her tone gentled. But meaning well doesn't erase the damage. I almost lost him because I let your voices drown out my own. That ends now. She pulled her phone from her pocket, thumbs flying. One by one, she blocked their numbers, the clicks loud in the quiet room. Then she looked up, meeting their stunned faces. I wish you the best, she said simply. But this friendship? It's over. Sophie opened her mouth, but Maggie was already turning, her coat swinging as she strode to the door. Her heart pounded, but it wasn't fear anymore. It was freedom, clean, sharp, exhilarating. Outside, the winter air bit at her cheeks, but she welcomed it. It felt honest, like the truth she'd finally embraced. She slid into her car, gripping the steering wheel, and whispered to herself, Step 1, done. She started the engine, her mind already racing to Step 2, David. The apology. The conversation that mattered more than anything. But as she drove, another thought surfaced, unexpected and electric. How do I show him I'm all in? Not just with words, but with something that proves I'm thinking about our future? The answer wasn't clear yet, but Maggie knew this much. It wouldn't involve lists or games. It would involve love. Real, unfiltered, undeniable. And she was ready. Chapter 9. The house hunt surprise. Monday morning found Maggie in a real estate office, clutching a folder like it contained state secrets. She hadn't planned to be here. Not until last night, when her parents' words kept echoing in her head. Show him you're committed. And what better way to show commitment than to take a step toward the future they'd always talked about? The house. Their house. She'd spent hours scrolling listings, imagining David's face when he saw her initiative. It wasn't about grand gestures or flashy drama. It was about building something real. Something permanent. Something that said, I'm all in. The receptionist smiled as Maggie approached. Hi there. Looking for a home? Yes, Maggie said, her voice steady despite the butterflies in her stomach. Something modest. 3 bedrooms, maybe a yard. The receptionist nodded, tapping at her keyboard. We have a few options. Let me pull up some listings. As Maggie waited, her gaze drifted to a corkboard near the desk. A collage of happy couples holding sold signs. Her chest tightened. She wanted that moment with David. She wanted to stand beside him, grinning like fools, knowing they'd built a life together. Here we go, the receptionist said, sliding a printout across the counter. Maggie scanned the listings, her pulse quickening. Cozy bungalows, charming colonials, a fixer-upper with potential. She circled 2, feeling a spark of hope. Then the receptionist spoke again, almost casually. Funny coincidence. Your husband was in here last week. Maggie froze. My husband? Yes, the receptionist said, smiling. David Montgomery, right? He was looking at properties. Said he wanted something perfect for his wife. For a moment, Maggie couldn't breathe. David had been planning this? While she was sipping wine with Sophie and debating TikTok tips, he was out here making real plans for their future. Her throat tightened, guilt crashing over her like a wave. He hadn't just been working 60-hour weeks for the sake of ambition. He'd been building toward this, toward them, and she'd almost thrown it away. The receptionist tilted her head. Would you like to see the ones he picked? Yes, Maggie whispered, her voice thick. Please. The woman handed her another sheet, and Maggie stared at the listings David had chosen. Homes with big kitchens, quiet streets, space for a garden. Thoughtful choices. Choices that spoke of love, stability, and a vision Maggie had nearly shattered. She swallowed hard, blinking back tears. This wasn't just about fixing a mistake anymore. It was about honoring the man who had never stopped thinking about their future, even when she'd lost sight of it. Maggie folded the papers carefully, her resolve crystallizing. She would make this right, not with words alone but with action. She would show David she understood what partnership meant, that she was ready to fight for them, for the life they dreamed of. And maybe, just maybe, she'd start by finding the perfect house. Chapter 10. The big conversation. The cafe smelled like roasted coffee beans and fresh pastries. A comforting backdrop for a conversation Maggie had been rehearsing for days. She sat at a corner table, hands clasped around a mug that had gone cold, her heart thudding like a drum. Today wasn't about grand gestures or clever lines. Today was about truth. The bell above the door jingled, and there he was, David, in his charcoal coat, looking every bit the man she loved and feared losing. His expression was calm, unreadable, but his eyes flicked to hers, and something softened. He walked over, each step deliberate, and slid into the chair across from her. Maggie, he said quietly. David. Her voice trembled, but she held his gaze. Thank you for coming. He nodded, folding his hands on the table. You said it was important. It is. She took a breath, steadying herself. I owe you an apology. A real one. His brows lifted slightly, but he stayed silent, waiting. I was wrong, Maggie said, the words spilling out like water breaking through a dam. I let people interfere in something that should only belong to us. I didn't see it at first. I thought it was harmless, but it wasn't. It was disrespectful. To you, to us, to everything we've built. David's jaw tightened, but his voice was even. Why? She swallowed hard. Because I got caught up in their noise, their opinions. I wanted to fit in, to feel, I don't know, like I was doing something right. But the truth is, I already had everything right. I just didn't appreciate it the way I should have. Silence stretched between them, heavy but not hostile. Maggie pressed on, her voice low and fierce. I ended it. The friendships, the drama, all of it. I blocked their numbers, walked away, and I'm not looking back. Because I don't want their voices in my life. I want yours. David studied her, his eyes searching. And what happens the next time someone tries to tell you how to live? I don't listen, she said simply. Because I know what matters. You. The life we're building. His gaze softened, but his tone stayed measured. Words are easy, Maggie. I know, she whispered. That's why I'm not stopping at words. She slid a folder across the table. David frowned, opening it, and froze. Inside were printouts of house listings, circled in neat red ink. His breath caught as he recognized some of them. The ones he'd picked. I found out, Maggie said gently, about the house hunt, about what you've been planning for us. And I want you to know, I'm ready, for all of it. The house, the future, the work it takes. I'm in, David. Completely. For the first time in days, his composure cracked. His eyes glistened, his throat working as he closed the folder slowly. When he spoke, his voice was rough around the edges. You really mean that? Maggie reached across the table, her hand covering his. With everything I have. David stared at her for a long moment, then exhaled. A deep, shuddering breath that seemed to carry the weight of the past week. His fingers curled around hers, warm and sure. I love you, he said quietly. I never stopped. Tears blurred her vision, but her smile was steady. I love you too. The cafe faded around them. The clatter of cups, the hum of conversation. Until there was only this. Two hands clasped, two hearts finding their way back. It wasn't perfect. It wasn't easy. But it was real. And for Maggie Montgomery, that was everything. Chapter 11. Moving forward, the house smelled faintly of fresh paint and possibility. Sunlight streamed through wide windows, pooling on hardwood floors that gleamed like polished honey. Maggie stood in the entryway, her breath catching as she took it all in. The open kitchen, the cozy living room, the staircase curling upward like an invitation to dreams. David was beside her, keys dangling from his fingers, his expression a mix of pride and caution. So, he said, voice low, what do you think? Maggie turned slowly, her eyes shining. I think it feels like us. His lips curved, just slightly. That's what I hoped you'd say. They walked through the rooms together, their footsteps echoing softly. Maggie trailed her fingers along the banister, imagining mornings filled with laughter, evenings curled on the couch, holidays with family spilling through the door. It wasn't a mansion. It wasn't flashy. But it was theirs, or it would be once they signed the papers. In the kitchen, Maggie paused, grinning at the expanse of counter space. Look at this, she said. I could actually bake without knocking over the toaster. David chuckled. You bake. Occasionally, she said, mock-offended. When I'm not sabotaging my marriage with wine parties. His smile faltered for a fraction of a second, but then he shook his head, eyes warm. We're past that. She nodded, relief washing through her. We are. They moved to the backyard, a modest patch of green framed by a white picket fence. Maggie inhaled deeply, the crisp winter air tinged with the promise of spring. You know, she said, I used to think yard work sounded awful. David smirked. Still do. Maybe not, she said softly, if it means planting something together. He looked at her then, really looked, and Maggie felt the weight of the past week lift, piece by piece. This wasn't just a house. It was a reset button, a chance to start fresh, not by erasing mistakes, but by building something stronger on top of them. David slipped his arm around her shoulders, pulling her close. We'll make it ours, he said quietly. Every inch. Maggie leaned into him, her heart steady for the first time in days. I can't wait. They stood there for a long moment, the winter sun casting golden light over the yard, until David broke the silence with a grin. So, TikTok worthy enough. She laughed, swatting his arm. Please, this is way better than TikTok. And for the first time since everything fell apart, Maggie believed it. This wasn't about trends or lists or anyone else's idea of perfect. It was about them. Two people choosing each other again and again, no matter what. Chapter 12. The celebration. The new house buzzed with laughter and the clink of glasses. Maggie stood in the kitchen, balancing a tray of hors d'oeuvres while dodging a pair of toddlers who had declared war on the snack table. The housewarming party was in full swing. Family, a few close friends, the right kind this time, and Ryan holding court in the living room like he owned the place. Nice dig, sis, Ryan called, raising his beer. Way better than your old shoebox. Town home, Maggie corrected, grinning as she set the tray down. And yes, this is better. David appeared behind her, slipping an arm around her waist. He looked relaxed, more than she'd seen him in weeks. His smile easy, his eyes warm. You're amazing, he murmured, low enough for only her to hear. She tilted her head, teasing. For the hors d'oeuvres or the house? Both, he said, kissing her temple before someone called his name from across the room. Maggie watched him go, her heart swelling. This wasn't just a party. It was a promise, a celebration of survival, of second chances, of choosing each other all over again. Later, when the crowd thinned and the last guest waved goodbye, Maggie and David stood in the quiet glow of their new living room. Empty glasses littered the counters, balloons sagged in corners, but Maggie barely noticed. She turned to David, her pulse quickening. Can we take a minute? She asked softly. He nodded, leading her to the couch. They sat close, knees touching, the hum of the heater filling the silence. Maggie reached for his hand, her voice trembling but sure. I know we've said our apologies, she began, but I want to say this here, in our new home. I will never let anyone come between us again. No lists, no noise, no distractions. Just us. David's fingers tightened around hers, his gaze steady. And I promise, he said quietly, to keep building this life with you, one choice at a time. She smiled through tears, and he leaned in, kissing her slow and deep, sealing the vow with something stronger than words. When they pulled apart, Maggie laughed softly. You know, she said, if Sophie could see us now, she'd probably try to make a TikTok out of it. David groaned. Don't ruin the moment. She laughed harder, and he joined in, their voices mingling in the warm, quiet house, a sound that felt like home.